Welcome to tonight's journey, a journey that takes us thousands of years back in time, back to the moment when the world had no name, when the sky had not yet parted from the earth, and when the first gods had not yet discovered the magnitude of their own power. Find a comfortable position, let your shoulders relax, and breathe gently. Tonight, there is no rush. There is only you and the whispered echoes of the oldest stories humanity once told around the fire. In the darkness of that primordial universe, everything began with chaos itself. There was no light, no form, only an endless, silent expanse, waiting to be awakened. And from that darkness, the first gods would emerge, bringing with them the earth, the sky, the seas, and the great conflicts that would shape the destiny of the world. Let your heart slow down. Let your mind drift into that ancient current. Because right now, we are about to open the very first door, stepping into the opening chapter of Greek mythology, where the universe was born from nothingness, and the fate of the gods began to stir. Are you ready? Before there was the sky you look up at every night, before there was the ground where you are lying now, before there were seas, mountains, stars in the heavens, everything was nothing more than an endless void called chaos. It wasn't darkness, as you know it now, and it wasn't light either. Chaos was like a colorless ocean, without shape, without sound, a vast, anchorless space where every seed of the universe already existed, but was still asleep, tangled together in a hazy, undivided state. In that stillness, there was no day, no night, no before, no after, only a feeling of waiting, stretching across countless ages, as if the entire universe were holding its breath, pouring all its energy into a single moment, the moment of beginning. Then, from the heart of chaos, a first idea stirred. That idea bore the name Gaia. Gaia, Mother Earth, did not appear with an explosion, nor with a flash of lightning, but like a soft layer of earth, slowly spreading through the hollow of nothingness. Where chaos was undefined, Gaia became the first surface. Where there had been nowhere to stand, Gaia became a foundation. Imagine you are drifting through endless space, and suddenly the soles of your feet touch warm ground. That is the feeling the universe had when Gaia was born. Gaia was not just the soil underfoot. She was everything firm, warm, fertile, everything that could cradle life. Her surface stretched out, curving into valleys, rising into hills and mountains, thickening into layers of foundation, even though, at that moment, there was still no one to walk upon her. From her own depths, Gaia brought forth her first children, Aurea, the ancient mountains, like vertebrae rising from Mother Earth's backbone, Pontus, the primordial sea, not yet with waves, only a deep, still surface reflecting the shadow of nothingness. Each being she birthed was a necessary piece, so the universe would no longer be just a meaningless emptiness. But Gaia was still alone. She spread her body across all of space, and yet above her was still an endless, cold void. In that primordial loneliness, Gaia bore another child, a child who would not lie upon her, but would lie above. From Gaia, Uranus was born. Uranus was not a man standing in the sky. Uranus was the sky itself, the first blue vault arching over Mother Earth. When Uranus stretched himself wide, the universe, for the first time, had above and below. There was a place where Gaia lay, and a place where Uranus covered everything. That first night, when Uranus descended and spread over her, was the moment the universe first knew what it meant to be held. Daytime did not yet exist, but the darkness of the sky wrapped tightly around Mother Earth, like a colossal blanket someone had gently pulled up. Gaia looked at Uranus, and Uranus looked at Gaia. Above and below, sky and earth found each other in perfect contrast. They became the primordial couple, Mother Earth and Father Sky. No vows were needed, no ceremony. Simply by existing face to face, they became the first husband and wife of the universe. Beneath the soft, heavy sky, Gaia began to carry life. Within her, new beings formed, like seeds sown into an endless field. One by one, they grew, shifted, pressing into Mother Earth's body with pain she had never known before. First came gigantic beings, tall, massive, powerful. This was the generation of the Titans, ancient gods, each embodying the raw force of a part of the universe. There was a Titan who governed time, a Titan of the sun, a Titan of the moon, a Titan of the sea, a Titan of memory, Along with the Titans, Gaia also birthed creatures that anyone seeing for the first time would be horrified by. The Hecaton chairs, monsters with 100 arms and 50 heads, the Cyclopes, giants with a single eye in the middle of their foreheads, their strength like lightning condensed in muscle. These children did not resemble the beautiful gods we often imagine. They were the embodiment of raw power, of storms, earthquakes, forces that even the young universe itself was not yet accustomed to. Gaia loved all her children, but Uranus was different. Each time Uranus bent down to look at the newborns, he did not see pride. He saw threat. Looking at the massive arms of the Hecaton chairs, he saw hands that could drag the sky down. Looking into the blazing eye of the Cyclops, he saw a gaze that could pierce through every secret. If these beings were allowed to grow, would they agree to remain under his sky, or one day, would they replace him? Fear seeped into Uranus like a shadow, and from that fear, he did what countless rulers after him would repeat over and over. He crushed those who might overthrow him. Uranus pulled open an invisible door, and beneath Mother Earth, a dark abyss yawned open. Tartarus. It was not just a pit. It was the deepest of all chasms, where light could barely reach, where time nearly stood still, where every scream was swallowed whole. One by one, his children were thrown into Tartarus. The Hecaton chairs, with their 100 arms flailing, were still locked in darkness. The Cyclopes, with their single fiery eye, were pushed into oblivion. The Titans were luckier. They were not all imprisoned. But their most terrifying brothers were buried like secrets forced underground. Gaia felt everything. Every scream from Tartarus was like a knife driven into her body. Her children, whom she had carried in agony, were denied the sight of the sky, imprisoned beneath the earth, which was her own flesh. Mother Earth suffered, not with the pain of stone or dust, but with the pain of a mother, helplessly watching her children stripped of their freedom. Night after night, Uranus still descended onto Gaia, like a heavy shroud of oppression. Each time the sky wrapped the earth, Gaia remembered the frantic pounding of the hearts of those trapped beneath. At last, the pain changed into something else. The will to resist. Gaia could not break Uranus's chains by herself, but she still had other children, Titans who had not been thrown into the abyss. One night, Gaia gathered her strength and forged a weapon with her own hands, a sickle of stone, harder than diamond, sharp as the first slash of light, tearing through the night. She summoned the Titans. Her voice was as gentle as the soil and as heavy as the mountains. My children, your father Uranus has imprisoned your brothers in Tartarus. Their pain is my pain. Among you, who dares to rise, to take this sickle and cut off this cruelty? But the Titans were silent. They were vast, but also afraid. For to stand against Uranus was to stand against the sky itself, against the very order of the universe at that time, until one voice resounded low but firm. I will. It was Kronos, the youngest Titan, the most ambitious and the most ruthless among them. Kronos took the sickle from Gaia's hand. Cold stone pressed into his hot palm, the sharp blade heavy, like fate itself being handed over to him. That night, when Uranus, as always, lowered himself to embrace Mother Earth, Kronos hid among the mountains, blending into Gaia's curves. The sky believed that, as always, the earth would lie still beneath his cloak. But this time, there was a hand gripping a handle. When Uranus dozed upon Gaia's body, Kronos crept closer, like a shadow slipping into the seam between heaven and earth. One strike, swift, decisive. The sickle came down, severing the reign of a god. Uranus's scream thundered like the universe's first lightning. His blood sprayed into the sky, fell onto the earth, staining the space between them from the drops of blood that fell onto Gaia. New beings would later be born. The Erinyes, the Furies of Vengeance, monstrous forms and other mysterious figures. And from Uranus's seed falling into the sea, the waves frothed white. From that foam, a goddess would one day arise, Aphrodite. But that is a story for later chapters. That night, an old order was cut short. Kronos freed his Titan brothers from the fear of the old sky. Uranus withdrew, becoming a silent firmament, no longer the tyrant king. Gaia, for a brief moment, could breathe. But from this point on, a new cycle would begin. Kronos was hailed as a liberator, The Titans acclaimed him as the new lord of the universe. He sat on the throne his father had once occupied, looked at the sky, at the earth, and felt power surge through every part of his being. Yet power often walks hand in hand with the very same fear. Before leaving, the shadow of Uranus, like a final curse, still echoed in Kronos' ears. As I was overthrown by my own son, so too will you be overthrown by yours. That prophecy hung above Kronos like an invisible sword. By day, he ruled. By night, he heard the curse repeat in his sleep. Kronos married Rhea, a gentle titaness, a goddess loved by all beings. Rhea carried in herself the hope of a new generation, children of Titan blood, born into a wider, more open universe. But each time Rhea gave birth, Kronos heard Uranus's echo in his mind. The first child was born, a gentle baby girl, Hestia. Kronos looked into the child's eyes, and instead of innocence, he saw his throne quivering. In a cruel moment, he swallowed Hestia whole. Rhea screamed, but could not stop him. The second child, Demeter. The third, Hera. The fourth, Hades. The fifth, Poseidon. Each time a child cried its first cry, that cry was choked off and vanished into the darkness of the Titan's belly. Rhea stood and watched, her arms empty, again and again, one child after another. Outwardly, Kronos remained the supreme god, but inside, in the thick darkness of his body, an entire generation lay swallowed, waiting in silence. When the sixth child came, Rhea could bear no more. She was pregnant again, but this time she carried not only a new life, but a plan. As the time of birth approached, Rhea left Kronos' dwelling and traveled to a faraway island in the sea, Crete. On that island, among wild mountains, there was a deep, hidden cave. There, with the murmur of streams and the cool breath of the wind swirling around, Rhea gave birth to her last child. It was a boy, with bright eyes full of vitality. Looking into the child's eyes, Rhea did not only see Kronos' fear, she saw a spark of hope. She named him Zeus to protect him. Rhea entrusted Zeus to a group of nymphs and young warriors called the Curetes. The nymphs fed him with the milk of the divine goat Amalthea, while the Curetes danced and clashed their shields loudly. Whenever Zeus cried, so that his cries would not reach Kronos' ears, that night Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and brought it to Kronos. "This is our child." Kronos did not look closely. Fear made him hasty. He swallowed the baby at once, never realizing it was only a cold rock. Rhea turned away, tears falling, but this time, they were no longer tears of utter despair. Inside her, a small flame had been lit. Her son was still alive, growing in a place Kronos could not touch. On the island of Crete, Zeus grew up amid the sound of streams, wind, and clashing shields. The boy played among rocks and trees, learning to listen to the footsteps of the universe. Whenever he looked up, Zeus saw the sky, but it was no longer the oppressive Uranus of old, rather a vast expanse that seemed to be waiting for him to reach it. No one told Zeus much about his destiny, but in his heart, there was a strange feeling that he was not just an ordinary child. The older he grew, the firmer his steps became, the sharper his gaze. His laughter echoed in the cave, and beneath it slept the rumble of thunder. Elsewhere, far away, Kronos still ruled. Inside his belly, his children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, still existed in darkness, not aging, not fading, only waiting. And in the space between them, between a Titan king bearing a curse and a boy growing up in a cave on Crete, a thread of fate was silently tightening. For many years, on that lonely island of Crete, Zeus grew up strong, his eyes sharp like the first winds of storm season, his body solid like the cliffs he ran across every day. The older he grew, the more clearly Zeus felt it. There was a calling force pulling him toward the distant horizon, a vague feeling as if he belonged to a place he had never set foot in, as if the sky above was still waiting for him to reach out and say, "This is your true home." The nymphs who raised Zeus saw that in his eyes, they did not stop him, because they knew fate cannot be held back by a pair of hands. One night, when the wind rushed into the cave, shaking the torches, and the sea outside gleamed under the moon, Zeus stood at the cave's entrance, listening to the whisper of the universe. Within that wind, he heard his mother's voice, Rhea, a voice full of pain, endurance, and hope. "My son, the time has come." Zeus was no longer a child. He wrapped himself in the goatskin cloak of Amalthea and took with him the gifts the nymphs had given as tokens of his childhood. And then he left Crete to step into the journey destiny had prepared for him, since the universe still had no light. Zeus wandered for many days along the sea, until he met Metis, the Titaness of wisdom, known for a perception deeper than even the gods. Metis looked at Zeus and smiled, as if she had been waiting for him for a long time. "I know why you've come." Her voice was as soft as water flowing over stone. "You want to overthrow Kronos? But you cannot do it with bare hands." Zeus lowered his head. "I must save the brothers and sisters he has swallowed." "But how?" Metis placed a hand on his shoulder. "Every tyrant has one weakness, his own fear. I will help you strike at that fear." She took out a small pouch. Inside was a liquid that shimmered like melted moonlight. "This will make Kronos vomit out everything he has swallowed. Find a way to make him drink it." Zeus accepted the gift. Up in the sky, a streak of light flashed, as if signaling that something was about to happen. The day Zeus met Kronos, the sky itself seemed compressed. No wind, no birdsong, as if all of heaven were holding its breath. Kronos, majestic upon his throne, looked at Zeus from afar. A young titan, or a new god. Zeus bowed his head, keeping his voice steady. "I am one who comes to serve you. I bring a magnificent drink, fit for the ruler of the sky." Arrogance softened Kronos' guard. He snatched the flask from Zeus and drained it in a single gulp. Within moments, Kronos felt a tearing pain in his guts, like a mountain collapsing from the inside. He collapsed, and from his belly, one by one, the gods he had swallowed were freed. First was Hestia, Zeus's eldest sister, then Demeter, Hera. Next came Hades and Poseidon. They fell to the ground like beams of light that had long been imprisoned, finally seeing the sky again. Zeus caught each of them as they fell. Hestia looked at Zeus and asked, her voice trembling, "You are the one who freed us." Zeus nodded, and in that moment, the 6 siblings looked at one another and knew they had found their leader. That moment was the very first boundary line of a war the universe would never forget. A war that could not be avoided, as if even time itself were holding its breath, waiting for it. It was the war between the children and their tyrant father, between the young generation of gods, carrying the breath of a new world, and the ancient titans, those who had ruled since the days when chaos had no light. Titanomachy was not just a battle. It was a transfer of eras, the turning of one of the greatest pages in the history of the universe. Zeus stood at the front of his siblings, Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon, his will blazing like thunder about to strike. This was not just their own fight, but the battle of every new generation against a rule that had long since outlived its time. When Kronos realized the coup had taken shape, he roared like thunder inside a storm, opening its eyes. "You dare rise against me?" His roar made the earth tremble, as if every rock, every root, etched his rage into their memory. He was not only angry, he was afraid. For this was the very fear that Gaia's womb and Uranus's curse had planted in his heart from ages past. In his fury and terror, Kronos raised his hand and summoned his Titan brothers, beings as tall as mountains, carrying the power to shape the sky itself. At their head was Atlas, the god with shoulders as broad as the primordial sky itself, who, by simply standing straight, could tilt earth and sway the winds. And then the battle began. But this was not a war humans can imagine. No steel swords, no bows and arrows, no warriors in iron armor. This was a cosmic war, a war in which each blow was enough to create or destroy a continent. When the Titans stepped onto the battlefield, colossal clouds gathered in the sky, not because of wind or storms, but because of the sheer force radiating from the gods' movements. Shadows stretched across the heavens, like a gray veil symbolizing the struggle between the old order and the new. It wasn't that the sun set, it was that light itself was being swallowed by the power of uncountable supernatural beings. Every Titan's step was like a whole mountain range shifting. The ground split apart, opening chasms that seemed bottomless. Those cracks did not appear because tectonic plates moved, but because the weight of the power the Titans bore on their backs was too great. Each time they rose, the layers of earth beneath their feet seemed unable to withstand the pressure of history rolling forward. Poseidon, the young god of the sea, for the first time swung his trident so fiercely that he summoned columns of water as high as fortress walls. Those columns surged upward, twisted, then crashed back down with a deep, booming sound like the drums of the gods. No ship, no sea, a creature could survive such force if caught between those torrents? Zeus, with lightning in his hand, a weapon the Cyclopes had forged for him from the first light of the universe, spun it in his grip. When Zeus hurled down that first bolt of lightning, it was the moment the sky became his ally. The flash was so bright that the firmament blazed like midday, then darkened again. In the space of a heartbeat, that thunderclap echoed to the very edge of Tartarus, where thousands of souls trembled, knowing that the universe's order was being challenged. But powerful as they were, the young gods could not overwhelm the Titans. Kronos and his side had existed since the dawn of the universe. They carried the primordial power, the raw force born of chaos. When time itself had no shape, Zeus hurled lightning, Poseidon churned the seas, Hades disappeared into shadows and struck from the dark. But the Titans still stood firm. 1 year passed, then 2, then 5, then 10. Neither side could achieve absolute victory. Each morning, the sun rose over a battlefield where the dust of war had not yet settled. Each night, the universe felt as if it had endured another great pain. Titanomachy dragged on so long that they said, even time grew tired. The sky turned pale with storms of lightning. The earth was blackened, as though burned by primordial fire. The sea turned twice as salty. From the furious breath of Poseidon, new mountains rose, only to be flattened. By the power of the Titans, the world seemed unable to bear another blow. But both sides still stood, because they knew if they fell, the entire future of the universe would fall with them. One night, as Zeus stood watching the ruined battlefield, Rhea appeared in a haze of clouds. "My son, what you see is only the surface of the war. Your true strength lies deeper than this." She placed her hand on the ground. A faint tremor traveled down into the earth. And Zeus understood whom his mother was referring to, the children of Gaia, whom Uranus had imprisoned in Tartarus. In the ancient days, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. "Free them," Rhea said. "They will give you something that even the Titans will fear." Zeus nodded. Together with Poseidon and Hades, he descended into Tartarus, a place where even light did not dare linger. There, the Cyclops looked at Zeus with his single burning eye. "You come for revenge." Zeus shook his head. "No, I come to return your freedom." In the darkness, Zeus broke their chains, and for the first time, the Hecatoncheires stretched out their 100 arms again. Knowing Zeus would be the one to overthrow the Titans, the Cyclopes forged 3 treasures for him. Lightning for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, the helm of invisibility for Hades. These would become the 3 weapons that shaped all of Greek mythology thereafter. When the young gods took their new weapons in hand, the universe seemed to brighten. By one more beat, Kronos and the Titans did not yet know that the balance had shifted. When the next battle broke out, heaven and earth witnessed a power the Titans had never faced. Zeus hurled his lightning, white bolts ripping across the sky like the first radiance of creation. Poseidon drove his trident into the ground, and the sea reared up into colossal whirlpools. Hades donned his helm, vanished from sight, and attacked from angles no Titan could predict. And the Hecatoncheires, with their 100 arms, flung boulders as large as islands at the enemy. Kronos fought back, but for the first time, he felt himself losing. Zeus's final bolt of lightning fell like an inverted pillar of fire. Kronos collapsed. The Titans' will shattered. The war that had lasted 10 years ended in a strangely brief moment. The moment Zeus stood tall upon a mountain peak, lightning in hand, and the universe, for the first time, acknowledged a new king. The Titans were judged under the new order. Many were imprisoned in Tartarus. Some neutral Titans were spared. But Atlas, the most loyal to Kronos, the most steadfast in battle, was sentenced by Zeus to bear the sky for all eternity. Atlas, with shoulders broad as ridges of stone, bent to take the vault of heaven onto his back, holding it in the place where Uranus once stood. It was a heavy punishment, but also the most beautiful. In Greek mythology, a being turned into a symbol of the universe itself, even in eternal solitude. When Kronos fell, Gaia grieved for all his cruelty. Kronos was still her child. From that anger and sorrow, she gave birth to the giants, beings filled with hatred for Zeus. It became a second great war, no less fierce, no less earth-shaking. The giants were taller than mountains, their eyes red like the fires in the earth's core. But Zeus had one advantage: prophecy. Only with the aid of a mortal, clad in a lion's skin, could the gods triumph. That mortal was Heracles, Zeus's son in later days. But that is the story of many chapters to come. In the Gigantomachy, Heracles and Athena united to defeat Enceladus, driving him into the earth, where his body lay. They said the island of Sicily was formed. When the giants fell, the new order of the universe was firmly established. Zeus and his brothers divided the cosmos. Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon ruled the sea, Hades ruled the underworld, Gaia grew quiet, Uranus drifted far, and Kronos remained imprisoned in eternal darkness on Mount Olympus, a peak so high that mist could not reach it, and clouds had to stay below. Zeus built a new court, Olympus. From there, Greek mythology entered a new age, the age of the younger gods, with stories of love, war, jealousy, wisdom, and tragedy. You can let your shoulders relax a bit, feel your breath slow down, deeper and calmer, because tonight you have just walked through one of the most beautiful and fierce epics of Greek mythology, the 10-year war between the ancient Titans and the young gods of Olympus. If you enjoy this slow, gentle way of storytelling, you can leave a comment below or simply tell me, what would you like to hear next in Greek mythology? And now, let your mind drift lightly, because in the next chapter, we will step into the world of the three thrones, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and the stories behind the fragile balance between sky, sea, and the underworld. And if you enjoy this journey, you can leave a small message, so I know you're still listening, from somewhere in the world. The war that lasted 10 years ended in a strange kind of silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of a storm that has just withdrawn, leaving the earth wrecked, the sky torn apart, and the sea exhaling in exhaustion. In that pale, fading light, Zeus stood on the highest crag of Mount Othrys, looking down at the defeated Titans. Being led into Tartarus, Hades walked beside them, silent as his own darkness. Poseidon stood farther away, his hands still gripping the trident, as if the roar of this battle's waves were still echoing inside him. In that moment, none of them were rulers. They were simply three brothers who had survived a war no one had truly wanted. Then Zeus spoke quietly, yet his voice carried far through the torn air. Now the universe must have someone to rule it, but none of us alone is strong enough to hold everything. The wind blew by, carrying the dust of the battlefield with it. Poseidon looked up at the sky. Hades looked down at the depths of the earth. They knew Zeus was right, and so, beside the chasm of Tartarus, still radiating the heat of war, the three young gods decided to do something no one had ever done before them. They would divide the universe into three realms to maintain balance, so that no one would repeat the tragedy of Kronos or Uranus. No one wanted to seize it all. No one wanted to be suspected. No one wanted to plant the seed of yet another war. So they decided to let fate decide. Zeus snapped off a scorched branch from the battlefield. Poseidon picked up a stone, washed up from the depths of the sea, and Hades took a piece of black ash from the darkness of Tartarus. They placed these three objects into the closed hand of Nyx, the goddess of night. She was the only one who did not lean toward any side. She stirred them, then let each of them draw one, and when they opened their hands, Zeus drew the sky, the realm where light resides. Poseidon drew the sea, the restless domain shifting between light and dark. Hades drew the darkness beneath the earth, where souls would one day return. No one knows whether Nyx truly placed the three objects into her hand or not. No one knows whether fate intervened. But that outcome, even now, after thousands of years, is still regarded as one of the most reasonable orders the universe has ever established. Zeus looked at his two brothers and said, "We are still brothers. Three realms, but one order." Poseidon laid his hand on his brother's shoulder, then looked toward Hades. In those shadowed eyes, for the first time, a glimmer of agreement appeared. As soon as Zeus accepted the sky as his domain, the heavens began to change. No longer the ashen veil that had covered everything during the war. They stretched out into endless blue, like an unfurled silk cloth. Zeus climbed Mount Olympus, and the mountain trembled as if it recognized its new master. There, the mist always smelled like the first grass of spring. There was no harsh snow, no cutting wind, only soft golden light draped around the temples. Zeus began to build Olympus, not with stone, but with laws. Each pillar that was raised was a promise that the world would have order, that light and justice would not fade the way they had. In earlier ages, Zeus forged a throne of gleaming gold, but more importantly, he established law, something even the gods would have to obey. "No one, not even I," Zeus said, "has the right to act against what has been decreed," a vow that, later on, he himself would struggle many times to keep from above. Zeus looked down upon the world, at the mountains, rivers, and nameless lands. He knew his work had only just begun. Poseidon left Olympus and walked down to the shore. When his feet touched the water, the waves drew back, as if they did not dare to touch their new lord. He went deeper and deeper, until sunlight from the surface was nothing more than a thin, shimmering thread in the distance. At the deepest floor of the sea, Poseidon built his palace, the Palace of Aegae. It was not as proud as Olympus, not as radiant as the sky, but dark, shimmering, and fluid, like the nature of water itself. The palace walls were coral, harder than steel, yet soft as silk when currents flowed across them. Its roof was woven from the deep sea light, that soft blue glow that appears only when the ocean breathes in silence. Poseidon sat upon his throne and thrust his trident into the sea floor. From that moment on, all sea creatures, from small fish, dolphins, to ancient monsters, bowed to him. Poseidon was not a gentle god. He carried within him the temper of the sea, calm as a quiet afternoon breeze, but capable of raging, like a storm that can sweep away a civilization. And Zeus knew this. That's why he believed the sea was the only place wide enough to hold his brother's restless heart. Unlike Zeus and Poseidon, Hades did not choose his realm. He accepted it, quietly, without complaint. He descended deeper, far deeper than the sea floor, down to where earth was no longer earth, and light was no longer light. The door to the underworld opened with a low rumble, as if an ancient page was being turned for the first time in thousands of years. Hades was very different, not quick-tempered like Poseidon, not radiant like Zeus, but still as cooled ash, from fires long since burned out. The underworld was not a place of pure punishment. It was simply the place every soul had to pass through. Hades divided it into regions: Asphodel Meadows, where ordinary souls dwell; Elysium, where heroes and the righteous find their rest; Tartarus, where titans and great offenders are imprisoned; a misty gate, where souls wait for judgment. Hades ruled it all, alone, without complaint. No blue sky, no cool wind, only a pale, hovering light, like the memory of the sun. And Hades accepted that, as if he had always known that his fate was to be the necessary shadow of the world. Although each brother governed a different realm, they remained bound by an absolute balance. Zeus held the power of justice. Poseidon held the power of change. Hades held the power of endings and beginnings. When one was shaken, the other two had to hold steady. When one realm fell into chaos, the other two would bear the weight. If Poseidon raged, the waves would shatter the cities of men. If Zeus grew wrathful, lightning would burn the land. If Hades rose in revolt, souls would lose their path, and the world would fall into disorder. The universe moved like a three-armed scale. Tilt it just a little, and everything could collapse. And that is why, despite their differences, the three brothers always held to their bond. Zeus watched the sky to guard order. Poseidon listened to the heartbeat of the sea. Hades listened to the footsteps of souls in the dark. Three brothers, three realms, one universe. Once balance was established, Mount Olympus seemed to change with the universe's every breath. Soft white clouds drifted past day after day, carrying the warmth of a new age where thunder once split the heavens. Gentler lights began to appear, signaling that the next generation of gods was preparing to step into the world. Olympus gradually welcomed these younger gods, each bringing their own story, their own origin, and a kind of power that had never existed before. The first to arrive in the strangest way was Athena, not from a goddess's womb, but from Zeus's very head. With a cracking sound, like stone being split, Athena stepped out, wearing armor that shone like dawn's first light. Metis, her mother, had been swallowed by Zeus to avoid a prophecy, but her wisdom did not vanish. It crystallized and became Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and justice. Her presence made Olympus sharper, as if a clear wind had blown through its tall white columns. After Athena, the twins Apollo and Artemis were born, but their path to Olympus was stormy. Hera, jealous because Zeus loved Leto, made Leto wander endlessly, no land daring to let her give birth there. At last, the island of Delos rose from the sea, and there Apollo light, music, prophecy, and Artemis the moon, the hunt, purity, cried their first cries. When they arrived on Olympus, the gentle light of the young sun and the milky softness of moonlight spread through the divine hall as if drawing the entire sky into a new age of poetry. Aphrodite rose from the sea foam, bringing a beauty that stunned both gods and mortals. Ars, Hephaestus, Hermes, Dionysus, all appeared in turn, each with their own temperament, their own strength, and their own very Olympian conflicts. Olympus was not just a palace. It became the capital of Greek mythology, where the stories of love, hate, struggle, and reconciliation among the gods were written in the light of time. Zeus watched them, with eyes both proud and anxious, because he understood. The greater the power, the harder it is to escape conflict. If you are listening to this story at night, let this sound carry you into a gentle sleep, as if you were lying atop Olympus itself, wrapped in endless mist. And if you enjoy this series, don't hesitate to leave a comment or hit follow, a small gesture, but one that tells me you want the next chapters to continue. Before the gods loved and grew jealous, before heroes raised their hands and monsters roared, even before Zeus sat firmly upon his throne, there existed something older than every crown. Not a weapon, not thunder, not violence, but law. Not a law handed down by the gods, but a law before which even the gods must bow. The ancient Greeks understood this very early. They did not see the world as a stage where the powerful could freely rewrite the ending. They saw the universe as a delicately stretched structure, where every action, no matter how small, inevitably pulled a response behind it. They believed that beneath every divine decision, beneath the thunder of Zeus and the fury of Poseidon, there were invisible threads being drawn tight. These threads did not glow. They did not call for attention. They had no clear shape. But if even one thread was pulled too far, the entire fabric of the world would tremble. And it was these very threads that kept the universe from collapsing under the weight of its own power. The Greeks called them the Moirai. The three goddesses of fate did not live on the radiant peak of Olympus. They did not walk through marble halls, did not compete for power, did not love, hate, or envy. They did not need to, because their power did not lie in command, but in recognition. They sat at the edge of time, where light was not strong enough to be called day, and darkness not deep enough to be called night. A place without a clear beginning, and without a definite end. There, past, present, and future did not line up one after another, but lay layered together, like thin sheets of cloth. Clotho sat closest to the moment of birth. In her hands was a spindle that never stopped turning. Each rotation marked the beginning of a life. Not only humans, not only heroes, not only kings, but monsters, gods, and beings whose names had not yet been spoken. Clotho did not choose who deserved to be born. She only spun the thread. That thread might be thin, it might be thick, rough or smooth, but Clotho did not judge, because existence itself does not require justification. When Achilles was born, Clotho spun a thread that was bright, strong, and short. No one said it aloud, but the thread had already taken the shape of fate. When a nameless child was born in a small village, Clotho still spun, quietly, calmly, without distinction. After Clotho came Lachesis. She did not spin. She measured. Lachesis held the ruler of life's length. She did not decide who would live long or die young, based on merit or prayer. She measured according to the balance of the whole. Some lived briefly, yet left ripples that echoed for centuries. Others lived long lives, without shifting a single thread beyond themselves. Lachesis knew the difference. The Greeks believed that when a hero was suddenly granted a second chance, when a king escaped death by the narrowest margin, it was not because Zeus had softened, but because Lachesis had loosened the measure slightly, not out of favor, but because the world needed more time before the consequence could unfold. And last came Atropos, the most feared and the most just. Atropos held the shears. Her hand did not tremble. She did not hesitate. Her blade was not sharp because of metal, but because it carried no emotion. When the moment came, she cut, not out of hatred, not as punishment, not from mercy, only because the thread had reached the point where extending it further would tear the entire fabric of existence. The Greeks told that even Zeus turned his gaze away when he heard the shears of Atropos close, not out of fear, but out of respect, for Zeus could hurl thunder, overthrow thrones, and alter the course of battle, but he could not command Atropos to stop. And that truth is the foundation of all Greek mythology, a world where the gods are not omnipotent, where power must stop at a boundary, where tragedy is not a mistake, but the natural result of existing within order. The Moirae did not whisper prophecies. They did not warn. They did not threaten. They did only one thing. They kept the universe from collapsing under its own weight. And so, whenever a god or a mortal believed they had surpassed every limit, when hubris began to bloom like a sweet thought, somewhere a thread began to tighten. 3 simple motions. Yet no one, not even Zeus, could alter the final descent of the blade. The Moirae were not evil. They were not kind. They were neutral. And it was this neutrality that made them terrifying, because it reminded both gods and mortals that power does not mean absolute freedom. Authority does not grant the right to cross every boundary. Even Zeus, the one who defeated Kronos, the bearer of thunder and ruler of the sky, could not command fate. He could delay, he could divert, he could twist events for a time, but he could not tear away a thread that had already been spun. And Zeus knew this, and because he knew, he feared not the immediate threat of overthrow, but the moment when he might unknowingly cross the line and pull the world into chaos with him. For before Zeus, there had already been those powerful enough to believe they could surpass all limits. Greek mythology does not begin with an all-powerful god. It begins with cycles broken by illusion, and with those who believed that sufficient strength could free them from fate. Kronos believed this too. When he overthrew Uranus, his father, the primordial sky, Kronos did not merely defeat a god, he believed he had defeated the old order itself, that the cycle of birth, replacement, and overthrow had been severed at the moment the sickle met the heavens. In that instant, Kronos believed he had become the first god truly free. No fear of replacement, no whisper of destiny, no shadow of a stronger figure waiting behind him. But that belief was the beginning of tragedy, because Kronos did not break the cycle. He merely stepped into its place. When he heard the prophecy that one of his children would do the same to him, overthrow him as he had overthrown his father, Kronos did not choose confrontation. He chose control. And so each time a child was born, he swallowed them, not in madness, not in hatred, but with a cold calculation that seemed almost reasonable to one who believed that power could rewrite destiny. Kronos was not a monster by nature. He did not kill his children for pleasure. He did it out of fear. Fear that everything he had gained would be repeated. Fear that he was only another link in an endless chain of replacement. And that fear, combined with absolute power, gave birth to what the Greeks named with a single word: hubris. Hubris is not confidence, not strength, not ambition. Hubris is the moment a being believes they stand outside the law of the universe. The belief that because one is strong enough, clever enough, vigilant enough, the rules that bind everyone else no longer apply. Hubris is when a god believes they can alter the Moirae, slow the hand of Atropos, stretch the thread Lachesis has measured, not through dialogue, but through violence, not through understanding, but through control. Kronos swallowed his children, not to defeat fate, but to flee from it. And in doing so, he pulled the thread of destiny tighter than ever. Because in Greek mythology, every attempt to escape fate is the fastest path straight into it. Zeus, the child saved by Rhea, did not become Kronos' overthrower because he was more bloodthirsty or stronger from the beginning. Zeus triumphed because Kronos had turned himself into the very thing he feared most, a god ruled by obsession, a king governed by the terror of replacement, a symbol of order, built upon the swallowing of the future. And when Zeus overthrew Kronos, it was not merely a divine coup. It was the universe speaking. No one, not even gods, may stand outside the law. From that moment on, Greek mythology ceased to be a story about who was stronger. It became a story about limits, about how power, if unchecked, will always create the force that topples it, about how hubris is not punished because it is evil, but because it tears the structure of the world. And that is why, when Zeus took the throne, he still cast his gaze toward the Moirae, not in fear, but in understanding, because forgetting even for a moment that he too was bound by invisible threads would turn him into the next Kronos, and the cycle would begin again, believing he no longer had to pay a price. And whenever hubris appeared, another name began to stir in the shadows: Nemesis. If the Moirae write fate, Nemesis ensures that no one escapes the consequences of crossing the boundary. Nemesis does not rush. She is not angry. She does not punish immediately. She waits. She waits until the arrogant believe they are safe, until victory is celebrated, until applause drowns out the last doubts. Then she steps forward, not loudly, not dramatically, just a small slip. a flawed decision, an event that seems accidental, and everything begins to collapse. In Greek mythology, Nemesis does not arrive to teach moral lessons. She comes to restore balance because order is not a static state. It is a constant tension between opposing forces, and when one side takes too much, the other pulls back, not out of fairness, but because the universe must survive. Beside Nemesis stand other goddesses of law, Themis and Dike. Themis is ancient law, older than the Olympian gods themselves. Not written law, but law felt, the law of nature, the law of balance, the law that ensures every action leads inevitably to a consequence. Dike is justice in motion, not emotional punishment, but necessary correction, to prevent the world from tilting too far. The Greeks did not see justice as something meant to bring happiness. They saw it as something that kept the world from breaking. And this distinction matters. In this worldview, suffering is not always wrong. It is a sign that a boundary has been crossed. That is why Greek mythology is filled with stories where the victor still must pay a price. Heroes are not praised unconditionally. Gods are not forgiven endlessly. Everything has limits, and those limits are not set by strength, but maintained by cosmic law. It is this law that makes the goddesses dangerous. In the chapters that follow, Hera is not merely jealous. She embodies marriage betrayed, domestic order torn apart by unchecked power. Athena is not only wisdom, she is uncompromising intelligence, intolerant of hubris from those who dare challenge it. Aphrodite is not merely love. She is the force that collapses reason. When desire crosses its boundary, all of them operate within the same system, a world where emotion, power, and law are never separate. And because of that, tragedy is inevitable, because humans and gods always want more than the law allows. They want love without consequence, victory without cost, immortality without responsibility. But cosmic law does not negotiate. It does not rage. It does not forgive. It does not forget. It only remembers. And when the time comes, it reminds quietly, precisely, inevitably. So before we speak of dangerous goddesses, tragic heroes, or slain monsters, we must understand this core truth. Greek mythology is not the story of good defeating evil. It is the story of limits, of what happens when a world believes it has surpassed every boundary. And that is why every victory in myth carries the seed of tragedy, not because fate is cruel, but because cosmic law always demands balance. And when balance is broken, whether god or mortal, hero or monster, all must return to their proper place, in silence, in order, and at a cost no one can escape. After the new generation of Olympus was born, the Great Hall was no longer just the dwelling place of thunder, the sea, and the dark. It became a living dynasty, where streams of air, strands of light fine as silk, and the breath of the gods intertwined into a symphony that never stopped. And on that mountain peak, among white stone columns that touched the sky, 3 goddesses emerged like 3 full moons in 3 different seasons, each radiating a light of her own, so beautiful that no god could turn away, so powerful that no god dared take her lightly. Hera, the moon of power and order. Hera was not just the wife of Zeus. She was the queen of every rite, the one who maintained the balance of marriage, oaths, and commitments. Hera's light was not gentle. It was sharp, strong, and filled with the pride of one who knows her own worth. When Hera entered this great hall, the whole space seemed to stand at attention. Even the columns appeared to straighten. No god dared underestimate her, for Hera did not need to shout. She only had to look, and that gaze alone was enough to remind all Olympus that her crown weighed more than any oath. Athena, the moon of wisdom and cutting reason. Athena carried a different kind of beauty, the beauty of thought, of a gaze that pierced through every hidden meaning. If Hera's power was born of bloodline, Athena's was born of intellect, of a clarity so cold it could make those before her shiver. Her light was not dazzling. It was like the silver gleam of a sword just drawn from the forge, cold, pure, and unshakable. When she entered, every conversation stopped, not out of fear, but out of reverence for a mind beyond all limits. Athena did not scramble for power. She did not need to. What belonged to her, respect, standing, and decision-making, came to her on its own, like water flowing toward the sea. Aphrodite, the moon of love and desire. And then there was Aphrodite, a presence that even the winds seemed to change direction for just to brush against her. Aphrodite did not arrive at Olympus like someone who came later, but as if the world had been waiting for her all along. Her beauty was not about perfection. It was an invitation, a shimmer that made even the strongest hearts falter. If Hera ruled through power and Athena through wisdom, then Aphrodite ruled through something no one could resist, the urge to live, to love, and to be loved. Her light was warm and soft, enough to make the gods forget they were immortal. Under Aphrodite's moonlight, they were only souls searching for someone's warmth. 3 moons, 3 forces, and Olympus's silent war. All 3 were beautiful. All 3 were powerful. All 3 carried something the universe itself bowed to. And because of that, there existed between them a war unseen, yet felt by everyone. Not a war for land like the god of wars, not a war for thrones like the Titans, but a struggle for influence over Zeus, over the gods of Olympus, and over the very hearts of mortals below. Their danger did not lie in swords or lightning, but in the symbols they embodied. Hera was law. Anyone who challenged her would pay the price. Athena was wisdom able to turn the tide of any war. Aphrodite was desire, an allure, able to shake even the mightiest powers. And when these 3 forces collided, the world could not remain still. Cities would rise or fall. Heroes would act in the name of loyalty, or reason, or love. Wars would break out not because of the spear's tip, but because of a glance, a word, or a secret promise. For on Olympus, love, power, and wisdom could all become weapons. And when these 3 goddesses coexisted, the universe could not help but change shape. Hera was the lawful wife of Zeus, and that, in Olympus, meant a great deal. From the moment Hera entered Zeus's palace, a very different atmosphere spread across Olympus. The wind grew more solemn, the gods bowed deeper. Even the clouds in the sky seemed to stand a little straighter. Hera was radiant, but her beauty was not soft like Aphrodite's. It was sharp, like the spear of moonlight. She bore the gaze of someone who knew exactly where she stood, queen of the heavens. But Hera carried a pain only she understood. Zeus was ruler of the sky, yet he was also a man who easily gave his heart to any figure who stirred him. And so Hera lived between 2 worlds. One world where she was the supreme queen, another where her heart was constantly threatened by goddesses, nymphs, or mortal women who caught Zeus's eye. Hera did not fight with a sword. She fought with authority, control, and the fear she planted in the hearts of those who broke the rules. And sometimes her sharpest weapon was silence. If Hera was the fire of power, then Athena was the icy water of reason. She was born in the loud crack of Zeus's skull, without a single drop of blood on her body, only the metallic gleam of armor, and a spear sharp as the horizon at dawn. Athena did not know jealousy. She did not know heartbreak in love. She did not tremble for beauty. To Athena, the world was a board of strategy, and emotions were only gusts of wind she let blow past her shoulder, never allowing them to touch her heart. She built her temple in Athens, where knowledge, law, art, and strategy took shape. She protected heroes like Odysseus, those whose minds nearly brushed the minds of the gods. Athena did not fight with jealousy or sweet words. She fought with absolute clarity, with strategies impossible to predict, with a calm so steady it made her opponents tremble. If Aphrodite made men infatuated, Athena made them so respectful they did not dare lie. Unlike Hera, born from divine bloodline, unlike Athena, born from Zeus's mind, Aphrodite rose from sea foam and light. She needed no introduction. Wherever she went, Olympus seemed to pause just to look at her. Her beauty was not perfection. It was an invitation, a whisper, a promise, something that made the hearts of gods and mortals alike beat faster without knowing why. Aphrodite was not only romantic love, she was desire, longing, the bursting of life itself. With a single smile, enemies could drop their spears, heroes could lose their judgment, and even Zeus could waver. Aphrodite's danger lay in this. She did not need power, yet she had enough influence to make anyone who held power wary. Olympus had many gods, but only when Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite appeared together in a story did the world truly change. There was no moment that showed more clearly the hidden power of these 3 goddesses than the most famous beauty contest in all of Greek mythology, the golden apple for the fairest. It was not a contest. It was a tear ripped into the heart of Olympus. It began with something tiny, so small that at first no one paid attention. Eris, the goddess of strife and discord, was not invited to the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, and Eris, in a very Eris way, turned her anger into a stone thrown into the still lake of Olympus. She tossed a golden apple onto the banquet table, with 3 brief words engraved on it. For the fairest, the wedding feast froze. The music stopped. The laughter died. Even the wind on Olympus seemed to pause, waiting to see who would be the first to step forward. Three goddesses step out. Aphrodite looked at the apple with a faint smile, not arrogant, but as natural as her own light. Hera rose, her beauty sharp as a crown of fire. She would accept no place but the highest. She had been born to be revered. Athena did not stand up immediately. She only tilted her head, looking at the apple as if it were a problem to be solved. But the light in her eyes said clearly, glory was also a kind of victory, and Athena never abandoned a just victory. None of them would yield. That small, golden apple suddenly became the center of a whirlpool of forces, pulling all of Olympus into a spiral of rivalry. Zeus was asked to judge, but he knew all too well, whomever he chose, he would ignite a conflict even his thunderbolts might not be able to quell. Zeus was not afraid of them, but he respected each one's power differently, so he refused to decide a choice that seemed wise, yet opened the door to a much greater tragedy. Zeus handed the apple to a mortal, a young Trojan prince named Paris, a small act, but the flick of a finger that toppled the first domino of history. On Mount Ida, the three goddesses took turns, persuading Paris. Hera promised Paris power, the right to rule over Asia and Europe. Athena promised him peerless wisdom, the ability to win every battle. Aphrodite did not promise power, did not promise victory. She promised him the most beautiful woman in the mortal world, Helen, wife of the king of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and in that choice, he cleared the path for the Trojan War, a 10-year conflict that burned down the greatest city of the East and claimed countless lives, both mortal and divine. Just one apple, just one moment of jealousy, just one whispered promise, enough to shake the world like an earthquake rippling down from Olympus to the earth. And that was only one of many times. These three goddesses collided like three stars, suddenly changing course. Zeus would often stand alone on Olympus, where the wind carried the scent of light and thunder. He watched Hera sitting straight upon her throne, her gaze reminding the world to stand up straight. He watched Athena by a window, her face calm as a silver mirror, reflecting every truth without bias. He watched Aphrodite walking through the garden, each step like a heartbeat's melody, and he understood why both gods and mortals were drawn to her. And Zeus thought, in the quietest of nights, lightning is not the only thing that shapes the world. Sometimes a single look from them changes more than 1,000 of my bolts. Zeus was proud of them, but that pride always carried an invisible worry, because each one of them, once angered, could unleash a storm that even Zeus, the immortal king, lord of the sky, would struggle to stop. And Olympus, beneath all its dazzling beauty, always trembled just slightly. Whenever those three goddesses looked at one another, if you're listening to this in the dark of night, let your mind settle like the sea after the wind has passed. We have just walked through a chapter about the most beautiful, most powerful, and also most dangerous goddesses of Greek mythology: Hera, power; Athena, wisdom; Aphrodite, love and beauty. When these three forces intertwine, they create countless stories that shake Olympus and lead the world into endless adventures. If you enjoyed this chapter, you can leave a small message, because it makes me truly happy to walk with you on this long journey. We leave behind the blazing heights of Olympus to descend to lower, darker places where heroes must confront the most primal fear of humankind, the monsters that even the gods themselves hesitate before. Python, Minotaur, Medusa. Three names like three echoes from a time when the world still had no clear boundary between light and shadow. Three primordial beings whose colossal footprints are stamped all over the history of myth. The story that follows is the journey of mortals, heroes who carry only simple weapons and trembling hearts, yet still step into battles that even gods are reluctant to fight. Python, child of the mist, from the age of chaos. Before Apollo was known as the god of light, music, and prophecy, he once faced one of the oldest beings in the universe. Python. Python was not an ordinary serpent. It was born from the damp earth of Gaia, in the age when Titans still ruled, when no ray of light had ever touched the valley of Pytho. Python was longer than the width of a valley, its skin dark as the stone beneath the earth, and its breath exhaled poisonous vapors that could wither trees in a single night. It lived in the deepest cave of Delphi, where the mist had never lifted, and no living thing dared come near. Python was the embodiment of chaos, the last remnant, of the Titan Age. When Apollo was still young, he decided the world needed a place where humans could seek truth, a place where light could shine on the greatest questions of the soul. And Apollo knew that place had to be Delphi. But for Delphi to become the sanctuary of light, the primordial darkness of Python had to be erased. In the mist-covered Delphi, Apollo walked forward, carrying on his shoulder a golden bow forged for him by Hephaestus. The wind passed through the trees, making their leaves shudder, as if they knew that today something ancient would come to an end. Python lunged from the cave. With a roar like breaking stone, the ground shook, as if it were trying to draw back on its own. Black clouds gathered. In a sky without a sun, Apollo did not retreat. He stood tall, the light from his body spreading outward, like a dawn tearing through the night. The first arrow pierced Python's thick hide. The second arrow made the mist dissolve. The third arrow, charged with the purest light, ended the ancient creature. Python collapsed, and its death opened a new clearing in the earth. Apollo laid his hand on the ground and said, "From darkness, light will be born. And from Delphi, truth will be spoken." From then on, Delphi became the center of the world, where prophecies echoed, the whisper of fate. Python faded away, but the war between monsters and gods had only just begun. If Python was primordial darkness, then the Minotaur was the darkness of humankind itself. Fear, concealment, and the sins no one dares admit. The Minotaur was not a creature born naturally. It was the result of a curse, a darkness rooted in the pride of King Minos, punished by Poseidon. So the Minotaur bore a strange form, the head of a wild bull, the huge body of a man, breath hot as the depths of a volcano, and a hunger that could never be satisfied. Minos hid the Minotaur inside the labyrinth of Knossos, built by Daedalus, a structure so vast that even the man who designed it could barely find his way. And to keep the secret buried, Minos forced Athens each year to send strong young men and women as tribute to feed the monster. Athens trembled, but Theseus, son of King Aegeus, refused to accept that fate. "If there is a monster under Crete, I will go and end it." Ships carried the youths of Athens to Crete. The wind blew, but the sea remained calm, as if Poseidon himself were watching the journey with a dangerous silence. Ariadne, daughter of Minos, fell in love with Theseus at first sight. She handed him a red thread and said slowly, "You may find your way to the monster, but there is only one path out. Remember to use this thread to return." In the whispering wind, Theseus stepped into the labyrinth. The stone door closed behind him, its echo like the lid of fate, slamming shut. The labyrinth was dark and damp, like the inside of a monster's throat. Each footstep came back as an echo, like a heartbeat inside the earth. Then a heavy breath rolled toward him. The Minotaur emerged. Its eyes glowed like embers, its roar tearing at the very air. It charged. Theseus dodged, feeling its horns sweep past his cheek like a blade. The fight did not last long, but every second felt like a lifetime. And in the moment, the Minotaur prepared to strike the final blow. Theseus lunged forward and drove his sword deep into the creature's chest. The Minotaur crashed to the ground, its roar fading like a storm that it had finally passed. Theseus followed Ariadne's thread back toward the light. When the labyrinth's door opened again, the wind blew cool, as though the world itself had just been freed from a heavy darkness. Medusa is the story that night loves to tell, because it reminds humans that sometimes darkness is not born. It is made before becoming the monster, whose name the world only dared whisper. Medusa had been one of the most beautiful maidens serving beneath Athena's temple roof. She was no goddess, not immortal, just a mortal girl whose beauty could make the morning light pause upon her face. Medusa was most famous for her hair, soft, long, golden, like silk woven from pure sunlight. It flowed down her shoulders like a bright waterfall, catching the light with every step she took. But her eyes were the most beautiful of all, not sharp like Athena's, not seductive like Aphrodite's, but deep and gentle, like a stream just released from ice, clear, cold, and impossible to look away from. Medusa was chosen as a virgin priestess of Athena precisely because of that beauty, its purity, discipline, and a heart untouched by worldly stains. She served Athena with absolute devotion. To Medusa, the temple was family. Athena was light, and her vow of chastity was a source of pride. But the purer the light, the easier it is for darkness to destroy it. Poseidon saw Medusa. It was not love, only the desire of a god, used to taking whatever he wanted. One day, inside Athena's sacred temple, Poseidon seized Medusa in his arms. The temple shook with a defilement that could not be forgiven. She had no way to resist the power of the sea god. Medusa begged Athena to save her, but Athena, goddess of wisdom, not emotion, only looked at Medusa with eyes cold as steel. In that moment, Athena did not see her as a victim, but as a stain on her temple. Athena did not punish Poseidon because Poseidon was her equal, and a war between gods would tear the world further apart. So Athena laid all her wrath on Medusa. The harshest punishment was not given because Medusa was guilty, but because she was the only one Athena could punish. Athena's anger turned into a dark miracle. Her golden hair became venomous snakes, slithering over one another, like wet, hissing sound. Her soft skin turned ash green, like a body long drained of warmth. Her gentle eyes became a gaze that turned anyone who met it to stone. Her clear voice became a thin, shallow breath, heavy and cold, like wind in an ancient tomb. Medusa did not scream. She did not curse Athena. She did not sob. She only stood there, watching her own hands tremble, feeling the first snakes stir on her scalp, and understanding, from today on, the world is no longer a place for me. Medusa left Athena's temple and walked toward a land where light itself did not dare step. Stheno, a coast of black rock, where the wind carried the smell of salt and death. There stood a cave, its mouth like that of a sleeping beast. A permanent black mist clung to its entrance, and inside, the wind circled endlessly, like lost souls, unable to find their way out. Medusa stepped into the cave, and the darkness wrapped around her, like cold wings. She hid there, not to hunt, but to avoid harming anyone. For she knew that just one brief meeting with her eyes would turn a person to stone. The stone statues outside the cave were not trophies. They were accidents, lost travelers, curious warriors, those who wanted to test themselves, all turned to stone by the simple act of meeting her gaze. Medusa feared that she avoided the light. She lowered her head. Whenever she heard footsteps, she lived like a shadow, folded into the darkest corner of the world. Medusa never wanted to kill anyone. She only wanted the world to be safe from herself. Medusa was immortal, but that immortality was its own crushing curse. No more friends, no more greetings. No eyes could touch her without dying. Every night, she heard the waves smash against the rocks, like the sound of her heart breaking. There were nights when Medusa whispered, "If only I were still human. If only I could hold someone one more time. If only Athena hadn't looked at me like a traitor." But there was no answer, only the sound of the wind, the slithering of mist on stone, and the hiss of snakes, like cursed thoughts made into sound. And then she became a hero's trial. Medusa did not attack anyone. She did not go seeking harm. She did not hunt for revenge. But the world refused to leave her in peace, because every age needs a hero, and every hero needs a trial. Medusa became a target, not because she was truly a threat, but because killing her became proof of human greatness. If Python was primordial darkness, and the Minotaur was caged darkness, then Medusa was constructed darkness, the darkness of injustice, misunderstanding, and the cruelty of the gods. And that is what makes her story more painful than any other monster's. Perseus, the man chosen by the gods. Perseus received the task of beheading Medusa as an impossible mission. But Athena, perhaps out of some buried guilt, chose to help him. She gave Perseus a shield polished bright as a mirror, winged sandals from Hermes, a curved sword forged by Hephaestus, a special pouch to carry Medusa's head. And she said, "Do not look at her. Look at the reflection." Perseus flew to Medusa's cave. The air there was thick, like black ink. The statues stood in frozen silence, their faces twisted in terror. The faces of those who had once met her eyes. Medusa lay in the darkness, like an unending nightmare. The snakes on her head slid over one another, making faint sounds, like needles scratching stone. Perseus did not look at her directly. He watched her through the shield, seeing her image drift across the metal surface in reverse. His heart pounded, like distant thunder. Then, slash, one stroke, fast, precise. Without hesitation, Medusa fell, her blood flaring bright like a falling star. From that wound, Pegasus the winged horse rose to the sky, as if beauty itself had managed to find its way back to the light after being imprisoned in darkness. Perseus placed Medusa's head into the special pouch and left the cave. before the night could swallow him. When Perseus returned, he used Medusa's head to save his mother from the cruel king Polydectes. With just one look, the king and his men turned to stone. So even in death, Medusa remained a monster with the power of a deadly gaze. Medusa was gone, but her story lived on. As a reminder, the darkness born of injustice is the strongest darkness of all. And yet, no matter the darkness, light, even the smallest flicker, will always find a way through. Let your breath slow down, and let your heart step into the place where light rarely reaches, the realm of Hades, where souls wander in the dark, where the wind does not blow through trees, but through cold stones of eternity. In that place, there are souls suffering punishments that never end, for their arrogance, for their schemes, for their mistakes, or simply because they stood on the wrong side of the gods. Tonight, you and I will go deeper into that darkness, to meet 4 souls made immortal through pain: Orpheus, Sisyphus, Tantalus, Ixion. Among the countless mortals ever noticed by the gods, only one could make all of Olympus fall silent to listen. His name was Orpheus, son of the muse Calliope, and the god of light, Apollo. Born of music and poetry, even Orpheus's breath seemed to carry the rhythm of the heavens. With just one touch of his lyre, rivers would slow their flow, the wind would lie still in midair, and birds would fold their wings to hear more clearly. But great talent often comes with a fragile heart, and that heart belonged to Eurydice, his beautiful wife, gentle as a flower deep in the forest. They lived happily until the day Eurydice, fleeing from Aristaeus, who tried to seize her, was bitten by a venomous snake and fell into the grass. Eurydice died in the arms of the man she loved. That was the moment Orpheus understood his music could not defeat death. But he refused to accept that. Orpheus took up his lyre, walked through forests, down to the very gates of the underworld, where the waters of the river Styx foamed black. Hermes did not need to say a word. The souls stepped aside on their own, opening a path for the musician. Before Cerberus Hades' 3-headed hound, Orpheus played only a single song. 3 heads sank low, as if lulled to sleep, and the beast dozed peacefully. For the first time in countless centuries, at Hades' throne, Orpheus sang a song with no words at all, only pain, and the entire underworld grew silent. The tortured souls stopped groaning. Sisyphus stopped pushing his stone. The Erinyes ceased their whipping. Even Hades, the stern king, let fall a single tear of iron. Hades returned Eurydice to Orpheus, but with one condition. You will walk ahead, she will follow behind. Until you have left the underworld, do not look back. The journey was dark as rock beneath the sea. Eurydice followed, light as a breath. Orpheus could not hear her footsteps, only the pounding of his own heart like war drums. They were near the exit. Sunlight was only a few steps away, but fear triumphed over reason. Orpheus turned. Eurydice faded before his eyes like smoke. Farewell, one last time, she whispered, before disappearing into eternal darkness. For the first time in the history of the underworld, they say a scream was heard that could split stone, not from Hades' judgment, but from Orpheus's own heart. He returned alive to the world above. But from then on, his music became a funeral dirge. No one dared come close. No one dared touch him. Later, the Maenads of Dionysus killed him in a frenzy, but his soul was carried to the Elysian fields, where he was reunited with Eurydice, and they never parted again. Greek mythology has no shortage of the arrogant. But Sisyphus, king of Corinth, was the first to dare deceive death himself. He was a descendant of Prometheus, so he was clever like fire, and as crafty as smoke. The first crime, Zeus once abducted Aegina, daughter of a river god, but Sisyphus saw everything. In exchange for water for his city, he betrayed Zeus to the river god, and Zeus swore, Sisyphus will pay. The second crime, when Thanatos came to take him, Sisyphus flattered death's beauty, praised him endlessly, then tricked him into putting on chains. Thanatos was locked tight. No one died anymore. Wars raged, but no one fell. The underworld stood empty. Even Hades was unsettled. Ares, who revels in killing, went mad. He stormed down to earth, broke the chains, and freed Thanatos. Sisyphus was captured again. The third crime, he ordered his wife not to bury him. When he reached the underworld, he begged Hades to let him return to scold her for failing in her duty. Hades took pity on him. He allowed Sisyphus to go back, and, of course, Sisyphus never returned. Years later, he finally died for real. And this time, no one listened to his pleas. His punishment was to push a massive boulder up a mountain. When he reached the top, the boulder would roll back down. He would start again, forever. No blood, no physical torment, only the despair of a task that would never be completed. Sisyphus was the first soul to understand that the greatest punishment is not pain, but meaninglessness. Tantalus, the one who betrayed the gods' trust. Among all the souls imprisoned in Tartarus, none chills Olympus as much as Tantalus, not because of power, not because of wisdom, but because of his cold-blooded betrayal, the betrayal of one most favored, who sat at the gods' own table, who had been given a trust no mortal ever had, a mortal beloved by the gods. Long ago, Tantalus was king of Lydia, wealthy, powerful, and regarded by Zeus almost like a spiritual son. Zeus often invited Tantalus to banquets on Olympus, not once, but many times he drank nectar poured by Hebe herself, ate ambrosia, the food of immortality, and heard private conversations. Between the gods, no other mortal ever had such a privilege. The gods trusted him. They saw him as a friend, even a confidant, and it was that trust which Tantalus chose to test. 3 crimes, and each unforgivable. Stealing ambrosia. Ambrosia is not mere food. It is the essence of immortality. To secretly steal it and bring it to the mortal world was Tantalus's way of declaring, "The laws of the gods do not apply to me." He shared ambrosia with his friends, boasting as if divine favor were a right, not a gift, revealing divine secrets. Zeus confided many important things in him: plans, intentions, prophecies. Tantalus retold these secrets to humans, like amusing stories at feasts. This betrayal was not a stab with a knife, but a stab with a smile. The most horrifying crime, the Feast of Pelops. His final crime was the one that turned all Olympus to stone, to test the gods, to see whether they were truly all-knowing. Tantalus killed his own son Pelops, chopped him into pieces, cooked him, and served him to the gods as a dish, not because he hated his son, not because he craved murder, but because he wanted to see if the gods would notice. A sick trial, a cruel joke, an act that went far beyond any human moral boundary. None of the gods touched the food. They all knew, except Demeter, grief-stricken over the loss of Persephone, who absent-mindedly ate part of the boy's shoulder. Zeus's rage was so great that the lightning he hurled at the earth shook the entire universe. He did not kill Tantalus outright. He prepared something worse than death, the punishment, hunger and thirst without end. Zeus cast Tantalus into Tartarus, into a vast lake that seemed to stretch to infinity. The water was clear as crystal, its surface reflecting the dim, eerie light of the world below. Above his head hung branches laden with fruit, apples, pears, figs, pomegranates, all ripe, full, releasing a fragrance that would make anyone's mouth water. But when Tantalus bent down to drink, the water instantly drained into the earth, revealing cracked, dry stone. He was left with a parched throat, so dry it was as though sand were being poured into it. When he reached up to pick the fruit, the branches curled away as if alive, lifting themselves just out of reach. He could see the fruit, smell it, but never touch it. Hunger, forever. Thirst, forever. And hope, forever mocked. No scream traveled far in Tartarus. No one heard his voice. No one saw him. No one remembered him. Because the greatest punishment is not pain, but the futility of every effort. Every time Tantalus stretched out his hand, Tartarus seemed to echo with a silent laughter, a cold laugh hidden in the sound of receding water and rustling leaves far above. Ixion, the man who desired Hera. Ixion, king of Thessaly, had once killed his own father-in-law, had deceived Zeus into forgiveness, and had been welcomed to dine on Olympus. But he committed a crime beyond measure. He lusted after Hera, queen of Zeus. Zeus tested him by creating a cloud in Hera's likeness. Ixion did not hesitate. He rushed to it and lay with the false Hera. From that union, the race of centaurs was born. When Ixion boasted that he had slept with the true Hera, Zeus's mercy ran out. The punishment: Ixion was bound to a burning wheel, spinning endlessly through the sky of the underworld, never stopping, never cooling. The underworld, where pain has no sound. As Hermes leads you past these 4 souls, you will notice something strange. No one screams anymore. No one resists. No one still hopes for forgiveness. In the underworld, a punishment lasts so long that pain becomes habit. Orpheus sits in a corner, his hand resting on a lyre of the dead. But this time, He does not play for himself, he plays for lost souls. So they may drift into brief sleep. Within the darkness, Sisyphus bends down once more to press his hands to the stone, as if this were the task he has done for many lifetimes and will do for countless more. Tantalus reaches up, and once again the fruit withdraws. The water at his feet rises, then drains away. Despair is no longer something new. It has become his very breath. Ixion spins like a meteor, his flames cutting across the black void, like a warning to all who would dare challenge Olympus. And Hermes turns back and whispers to you, "Do you see, not all punishments of the gods are thunderbolts and swords. Some punishments are music taken away. Some are tasks that never end. Some are thirst never quenched. Some are flames that never die. But the greatest punishment of all is loneliness." Before human beings ever dared to challenge the gods, before they found the courage to raise their voices and ask about their own fate, before the very first heroes stepped out of darkness to face monsters, a transformation had already taken place in the world. It was not dramatic. It did not arrive with noise. It was not marked by blood. It was not foretold by thunder or prophecy. No opening war announced it. No curse was spoken from the sky. No divine hand struck down in punishment. The change came quietly, almost invisibly, yet it ran deep enough to tilt the entire course of humanity. It was the moment knowledge entered human life. Greek mythology does not claim that humans suddenly became arrogant or rebellious. It does not paint them as creatures who, for no reason, decided to oppose the cosmic order. Instead, those ancient stories whisper something slower and far darker. Human beings were given something beyond what their early, fragile hands were meant to carry. A gift not gleaming like a crown, not sharp like a weapon, yet heavier than all of it. Something that could not be set aside, could not be returned, and once touched, offered no road back to the old state. Knowledge did not make humans powerful immediately, but it made it impossible for them to keep living in the calm, unconscious safety of instinct. Before knowledge, humans lived as part of nature. When they feared the cold, they sought shelter. When they were hungry, they searched for food. When danger approached, they ran, they died, but did not ask questions about death. They suffered, but did not ask why they suffered. The world was harsh, but simple, and that simplicity was a kind of peace humanity would never possess again. Because knowledge, once it appears, does not merely open the door of understanding. It slams shut the door of innocence. When knowledge entered, humans began comparing today with yesterday. They remembered old pain and began to fear pain that had not yet arrived. They no longer lived only inside the present moment. They lived inside memory and anticipation as well. They began to imagine the future events that had not happened. Death as a destination that could not be avoided. And from that point, the first anxiety of humankind was born, not from violence, but from awareness, not from the gods, but from the capacity to understand the world more deeply than the world wished to allow. The one who gave this gift was not Zeus, not the god who ruled the sky, not the one who held thunder and law. Deep down, the Olympians did not need humans to understand too much. Their order was built upon a clear boundary between the one who commands and the one who obeys. Knowledge does the opposite. It blurs the line. And so that fateful gift did not come from Olympus. It came from someone standing at the edge of divine order. Prometheus. Prometheus was not the most powerful of the gods, but he was the one who saw ahead. He did not look at the world through the eyes of a ruler, but through the gaze of someone who understood that a being, once it has the ability to comprehend, will never again accept living entirely in silence. Prometheus did not love humans because they were strong or noble. He loved them because they were fragile, because they could suffer. And because inside that fragility existed a potential that even the gods could never fully control. When Prometheus gave knowledge to humankind, he did not simply alter their destiny, he altered the very structure of tragedy across all Greek mythology. From that moment, humans were no longer merely creatures who endured fate. They became creatures who began to question it. And that was the true beginning of every later conflict between human and God, between hero and destiny, between the longing to rise beyond limits and the price that must be paid. Knowledge did not make humans rebel instantly, but it planted in them a seed that could never be uprooted. The awareness that the world can be understood, and if it can be understood, then it can also be doubted. Prometheus was not the supreme wielder of power. He did not command thunder. He did not rule the oceans. He did not govern death. He was a titan of forward thinking, the one who saw before in a world where most power cared only about order and stability. While Zeus regarded humanity as a variable that must be controlled so the universe would not drift off course, Prometheus saw them as a possibility not yet fully born. The earliest humans in Greek mythology were not warriors, not heroes. They were beings who trembled in the cold, feared the dark, feared wild beasts, feared death without understanding what it was. They lived by instinct, eating when hungry, running when afraid, dying without knowing why they died. And Prometheus looked at them with a different kind of sight. Not the gaze of someone who rules, but the gaze of someone who understands fragility. The fire Prometheus stole was not merely fire. If it had been only physical flame, something to ignite and then fade, it would not have shaken Olympus. What Prometheus brought down to the human world was a capability, a chain of capabilities, a door opening into consequences no god could ever fully close again. Fire allowed humans to cook food, and that seems simple, but it changed the body. Cooked food is easier to digest, brings less sickness, allows people to live longer and stronger. But more importantly, it released time. When humans no longer had to chew raw food, hunt without pause, or move endlessly to escape the cold, gaps appeared in their days. At first, those gaps were rest. Then they became observation, and very quickly after that, they became thought. Fire warmed the body, allowing humans to survive in harsher lands. But at the same time, it warmed memory. Long nights around the fire became the first place where stories were told, not for entertainment, but for remembrance, to remember the paths taken, to remember those who died, to remember how brutal the winter had been the year before. When memory is shared, it no longer belongs to one person. It becomes collective memory. And from there, history, however faint, begins to form. Fire allowed humans to make tools, not only tools for hunting, but tools for building. Stone was heated, metal was smelted. Objects that did not exist in nature began to appear. And when humans looked at a tool created by their own hands, they recognized something dangerous for the first time. The world can be changed, not merely adapted to, but altered in return. That idea, even before it had a name, was the seed of power. Yet perhaps the deepest effect of fire did not lie in the hands, but in the mind. Fire drove back darkness, and in that light, humans began to see more clearly what had once been only vague sensation. The face of another person, a wound, death, fear. When darkness retreated, imagination did not disappear, it changed shape. Humans began to imagine not only what might be lurking in the night, but what might happen tomorrow, and that this ability to picture tomorrow was an irreversible turning point. Fire gave humans time, but time is not always a comfortable gift. Time allows thinking. Thinking allows comparison. Comparison produces questions. Questions create unease. Humans began to realize that today is different from yesterday, that everything can change, that death is not merely a random moment, but a destination that is certain. And so anxiety appeared not because danger stood in front of them, but because the future had not yet arrived. When Prometheus carried fire from Olympus down to the human world, he did not simply take an object, he broke a boundary. But it was not the boundary between gods and humans in some simple sense. It was the boundary between living and knowing that one is living, between existing and being conscious of existence, between instinctive reflex and self-questioning thought. From that moment, humans no longer lived like animals. They no longer merely reacted to the world. They began to think about it. They began to ask who they were within it. And with that question came a new burden. The burden of responsibility, of choice, of knowing that every action carries consequences. Yet from that same moment, humans could never live as they had before. They could not return to the carefree state of pure instinct. They could not forget what they had understood. They could not extinguish the fire in the mind, even if the fire outside were taken away. Knowledge, once given, cannot be retrieved. And that is the deepest tragedy in the story of Prometheus. He did not turn humans into gods, but he did not leave them the option of remaining simple creatures either. That fire did not merely light the world, it lit up the human being and revealed everything fragile, fearful, and longing to cross the limits that had been sleeping inside them. Pandora's box did not contain calamity in the simple way later people often retell it. It was not a jar packed with evil waiting to be released, nor a childish trap set for the curiosity of a woman. In the way the ancient Greeks saw the world, the box was more like a threshold than a weapon. It marked the moment humanity stepped across the final border of unconsciousness, into a life where every sensation has weight, every loss has a name, and every pain leaves a mark in memory. What flew out of the box was not absolute disaster, because these things had never been created from nothing. Suffering had always existed. Illness had always existed. Loss, disappointment, death. These were all part of biological life, long before humans learned to think. But before Pandora, humans experienced them as natural reflex, like an animal wounded and collapsing. There were no questions, no resentment, no concept that this should not have happened. Death came, life ended, and nothing lingered. After Pandora, everything changed. Suffering was no longer a passing sensation. It became a mental condition. Illness no longer weakened only the body. It planted fear of the future. Loss was no longer merely the absence of a living being. It became an emptiness stretched across memory, habit, and the things that had once felt familiar. Disappointment became more than momentary failure. It became the collapse of expectation, a concept that can only exist when humans have learned to imagine what should have happened. And death, from that moment, gained meaning. It was no longer merely the end of biological life. It became a mental event, a limit that cannot be negotiated with a question with no answer. Humans became aware that they will die, not right now, but certainly, and that awareness turned every moment of living into something fragile, breakable, and unforgettable. That is why to say Pandora brought disaster to humanity is too simple. Pandora did not create suffering. She opened the capacity to recognize suffering. She did not ruin the world. She made the world deep, and the price of depth is tragedy. Before Pandora, humans died like animals without knowing they had lived. After Pandora, humans died like humans knowing they had existed, had loved, had lost, had hoped. And that difference made pain heavier, but it also made life meaningful, because pain that is consciously known, no matter how brutal, is still different from the emptiness of unconsciousness. And then, when everything had flown out of the box, when suffering, illness, fear, and death had covered the world, one thing remained at the bottom. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who has never been hurt, not blind faith that everything will turn out fine, but the hope of someone who has stared directly into tragedy, who understands that loss is unavoidable, life is unjust, the final ending is still death, and yet chooses to keep walking. That hope does not deny pain. It exists beside pain. In ancient Greek thought, hope is not a reward. It is the last burden left behind, because hope is what makes humans continue living, continue loving, continue building, even when they know all of it might one day vanish. Hope allows tragedy to be endured. It does not erase tragedy. It does not heal the wound, but it prevents the wounded from collapsing immediately. And that is why Pandora's box should not be understood as a story of punishment. It is the story of humans becoming human, of the moment they lost innocence forever, but gained meaning in exchange. A life no longer easy, no longer purely instinctive, but deep enough to be remembered. Pandora closed the box, but the world could not return to what it had been, and humanity, from that moment onward, stepped onto a road with no possibility of turning back, the road where knowledge, tragedy, and hope walk side by side. From Prometheus and Pandora onward, humanity stepped into the most dangerous position in the universe, no longer a creature of pure instinct, yet not a god. Humans know they will die. They know they are not all-powerful. They know the world is not fair, and yet they must still live inside it. This is why humans dare to challenge the divine, not out of arrogance, but because they cannot return to being creatures who know nothing. The tragedy of humanity does not lie in punishment. It lies in knowledge that cannot be erased. You can strip away weapons, you can shackle the body, but you cannot force a being who has understood to forget what it has already come to know. Humans are not tragic because they are punished. If it were only punishment, the tragedy would have ended long ago, like a lash across the skin, sharp and final, and then gone. Humans are tragic because they have learned too much to return to being simple creatures. They know too much to live in unconsciousness, yet not enough to fully carry the consequences of that understanding. That is the deepest tragedy of Greek myth. Knowledge does not kill humans immediately, but it leaves them with nowhere to hide. once they know. They cannot pretend they do not. Once they have seen, they cannot turn back and close their eyes. And from that moment on, every choice grows heavier. Every action drags behind it consequences that stretch beyond a single life. Prometheus did not create heroes. He did not forge swords for them. He did not grant them supernatural strength. He did not write them a glorious fate in advance. He gave them only the capacity to become heroes, the capacity to think, to compare, to imagine, and to dream of something other than what is. The fire of Prometheus did not turn humans into warriors. It turned them into beings who were conscious of their own potential. And when a being knows it might cross a limit, the act of never trying becomes unbearable. From that point on, the Greek hero is no longer someone who moves blindly. They know what they are doing. They know the risk. They know the boundary. And precisely because they know, their actions carry the color of challenge not only against monsters, but against the cosmic order itself. Achilles knows he will die young and still chooses glory. Odysseus knows that cleverness can lead to punishment and still wants to see more. Oedipus does not flee fate in ignorant panic. He pursues the truth to the very end, even when that truth destroys him. That is not foolish recklessness. It is the inevitable consequence of knowledge. Pandora is the same. She did not create suffering. Suffering had always existed, threading itself through the fragile human body. But Pandora created consciousness of suffering, the ability to name it, to remember it, to fear it even before it arrives. From the moment the box is opened, humans do not merely hurt. They know that they are hurting. And that awareness turns pain into tragedy, because a being that does not consciously grasp pain will endure it and then forget. But a being that is conscious will carry memory, foreboding, and fear that lingers. They begin to ask, why did this happen to me? And it is that question, not pain itself, that draws them closer to the gods. From Prometheus and Pandora onward, every Greek tragedy becomes unavoidable, not because the gods grew more cruel, not because humans suddenly became evil, but because knowledge changed humanity's place in the universe. Heroes challenge the gods because they know the gods are not omnipotent. They know even Zeus is bound by the Moirae. They know that even divinities carry fear, jealousy, and limits. And once they know that, absolute submission no longer feels convincing. Humans ask questions because they know the world is not silent. The world responds. The world remembers. The world answers through consequences, not through speech. And once humans realize their actions can shake the order of things, they are no longer satisfied with existing only inside the boundaries that were handed to them. And the gods, yes, they punish, not entirely because humans are wicked, not entirely because humans are rebellious, but because humans have stepped too close to the gods' border. In Greek mythology, punishment is not always wrath. Often it is a protective reflex. Because when humans move too close to divine power, when they know enough to question, enough to doubt, enough to challenge, the line between God and human begins to blur. And for the gods, that line is not merely pride. It is what keeps order from collapsing. So, Greek tragedy is not a war between good and evil. It is a collision between knowledge and limit, between humanity's hunger to understand and the universe's need to remain intact. Humans cannot return to being simple creatures because they have seen the fire. The gods cannot allow humans to go too far because that fire could burn the world itself. And between those two forces, between the desire to rise and the fear of losing control, tragedy is born, not as a cruel punishment, but as the inescapable price of knowing too much in a universe built on boundaries. After Prometheus, humans are no longer innocent. After Pandora, humans are no longer naive. And from here, every story of heroes, of love, of death, of immortality is no longer only the story of the gods. It becomes the story of beings who know they are finite, yet still dare to live as if their lives hold meaning, and that this is the fire that no god can extinguish. And as this story comes to an end, perhaps what lingers is not the name of a god, not the triumph of a hero, nor a prophecy finally fulfilled, but a very quiet feeling that this world was never built for human beings to live in perfect safety. It was built from limits, from fragile boundaries, that neither gods nor humans are allowed to cross without paying a price. Greek mythology, in the end, is not a collection of fairy tales meant to comfort. It does not promise rewards for obedience, nor does it guarantee justice for the virtuous. It does only one thing, and it does it honestly. It tells us what happens when a being knows too much inside a universe designed to preserve balance. from chaos to Olympus, from Zeus to the Moirae, from Prometheus to Pandora, from heroes to tragedy. Everything turns around the same axis: knowledge and its cost. Human beings are not punished because they are evil. They do not suffer because the gods are cruel beyond necessity. They suffer because they have seen the fire, and once they have seen it, they cannot turn back toward the darkness and pretend they never knew. Perhaps that is why Greek mythology is still alive today, not because it speaks of gods, but because it speaks of us, of human beings, who know they are finite, who know they will lose, who know they are not all-powerful, and yet still love, still choose, still move forward, as if their lives carry meaning. If you are listening to this story at night, when the room has grown quiet, when the outside world begins to fade, take a moment to think. In your own life, have you ever felt that you knew too much to return to innocence? A truth you cannot forget, a choice you cannot undo, a moment when you realized you had crossed an invisible boundary. If so, you are not alone. That is a deeply human experience, and it is also a profoundly Greek tragedy. If this story has slowed you down, if it has made you look at knowledge, limits, and yourself with a gentler gaze, leave a comment below. Tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it for you right now? And what part of Greek mythology made you think the most? If you would like to continue journeys like this, ancient stories, not meant to entertain, but to understand why human beings are always caught between the desire to rise and the fear of crossing too far, consider following the channel. We will return with other gods, other heroes, other tragedies, but always with the same quiet question. When we know too much, how do we choose to live? Have a peaceful night, and if you are about to sleep, let Prometheus's small flame burn just enough in your mind, and then close your eyes.